Title: The Millionaire Who Chose Poverty for a Day. Narration. In the heart of a bustling metropolis, where skyscrapers gleamed like monuments to ambition and streets pulsed with ceaseless activity, lived a man named Alexander Hartman. To the outside world, he was the embodiment of success. His name was synonymous with wealth, power, and influence. From the penthouse of his towering apartment, he could survey the city that bowed almost reverently beneath him. His fortune was immense, a staggering accumulation of assets, investments, and ventures that could rival the GDP of some small nations. Yet for all this, Alexander Hartman was profoundly unhappy. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and social appearances, each meticulously choreographed to project an image of perfection. Yet behind the polished veneer of his life lay an emptiness that no sum of money could fill. Friends, acquaintances, and even family had become mere actors in the theatre of his life. Their affections often conditional, their smiles a reflection of the potential benefits they could gain from him. Trust was a currency he could not spend. Love was a commodity he could not buy. And happiness, the one treasure that had eluded him all these years, remained stubbornly out of reach. One night, after another lavish party, where the laughter felt hollow and the champagne tasteless, Alexander found himself staring out over the city skyline. He watched the lights flicker, each a small life of ordinary joys and struggles. For a fleeting moment he envied them, the simplicity of their existence, the unassuming contentment that seemed to flourish in their humble lives. He realized that he had never truly lived, not as himself, but as a reflection of expectations, a projection of wealth, a vessel for others' desires. It was in that moment of quiet desperation that Alexander made an audacious decision. He would become poor for a day. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. He would leave behind his riches, abandon the comforts of luxury, and step into the shoes of someone who had nothing. He wanted to know, to experience what it meant to live without the armor of wealth, to seek happiness in its purest, most unadorned form. The next morning, he abandoned his penthouse, leaving behind his tailored suits, his expensive cars, and the network of servants who anticipated his every whim. He donned a simple coat, one that had once belonged to a distant relative, and took nothing with him but a few dollars in his pocket. Alexander stepped into the world not as a millionaire, but as a man among men, exposed and vulnerable, stripped of the privileges that had insulated him from reality. His first encounter with poverty, though brief, was humbling. On the streets, he witnessed the quiet dignity of those who struggled daily, people who smiled despite hardship, who helped one another with a generosity that required no wealth, only humanity. Alexander wandered through crowded marketplaces, watched children play with improvised toys, and listened to the stories of street vendors who had little yet found contentment in each day's small victories. Each encounter chipped away at the layers of cynicism that years of excess had built around him. It was during a rainy afternoon, sitting under a tattered awning with a cup of lukewarm coffee he had bought from a corner shop, that Alexander had his first true realization. He watched a young boy, no older than 10, offer half of his modest sandwich to a stray dog shivering in the cold. The boy's face lit with joy, not because of recognition or reward, but because of the simple act of kindness. In that moment, Alexander understood that happiness was not measured in digits on a bank statement or in the sparkle of a diamond, but in the connections, the compassion, and the authenticity of life lived without pretense. By evening, Alexander's pockets were empty, his stomach grumbled, and his body ached from the unfamiliar exertions of life without luxury. Yet, for the first time in decades, his heart felt light. He had no one to impress, no obligations to manipulate, no masks to wear. The world had been stripped of its facades, and what remained was pure experience, raw and unfiltered. A smile, real and unforced, spread across his face as he realized the irony. In losing everything he thought he needed, he had found something infinitely more valuable. The following day, Alexander returned to his penthouse, his fortune intact, yet he was profoundly changed. The opulence that had once suffocated him now seemed merely ornamental. He did not need to abandon his wealth permanently to understand the lesson. It was not the money that had enslaved him, but the illusion of its power over his soul. He began to cultivate genuine relationships, to seek friendships built on sincerity rather than utility, and to find joy in the small, fleeting moments that wealth had once overshadowed. Yet Alexander also carried a secret. The memory of that day as a poor man was sacred. It reminded him that life's truest treasures were invisible to the eye, and that happiness was a choice, not a possession. He would visit the streets where he had walked, not as an observer but as a participant, giving anonymously, helping without recognition, and reliving the purity of human connection that had once been lost in his gilded cage. In time, Alexander Hartmann became a paradox, a millionaire who understood poverty, a man of wealth who found freedom in simplicity. He hosted no grand parties to impress society, he collected no luxuries for display, and he spent his fortune quietly, creating opportunities for others to experience joy without conditions. His legacy was not in the empire he built, but in the lives he touched, the kindness he sowed, and the profound example he set, that wealth is hollow without heart, and that even the richest among us can rediscover happiness when we strip life to its essentials. As years passed, the story of the millionaire who chose poverty for a day became something of a legend, whispered among those who sought truth in a world obsessed with appearances. Alexander never sought fame for his journey, nor did he reveal the depths of his despair before that pivotal day. He simply lived, deeply and authentically, a testament to the transformative power of humility, empathy, and the courageous pursuit of true happiness. And sometimes, late at night, he would sit by the window of his penthouse looking out at the city lights that once symbolized success, but now represented something entirely different. He would smile, remembering the boy with the sandwich, the stray dog, the laughter of children playing with sticks and discarded bottles, and he would feel, with a clarity that money could never buy, that he had finally come home, not to a place, but to a state of being where life, in all its imperfect beauty, was enough. Perfeito! Vou continuar a narração, expandindo cada momento da experiência dele como pobre, detalhando encontros, dilemas internos e reflexões para se aproximar de 20.000 caracteres. Aqui vai a continuação. Alexander woke the next morning with the city still cloaked in mist, the streets wet from an early rain. He had slept on a simple bench in a quiet park, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirp of a bird. For a man accustomed to silk sheets and climate-controlled luxury, the cold had been unforgiving, yet strangely invigorating. Each discomfort reminded him he was alive, truly alive in a way he never had in his penthouse cocoon. His first encounter of the day was with an elderly woman named Margaret, who sold handmade scarves at a small corner stand. She was frail, her hands lined with decades of labor, yet her eyes held a spark of humor and wisdom. Alexander watched as she greeted every passer-by with warmth, even when they could not afford to buy. He approached cautiously, pretending to examine her scarves, and struck up a conversation. Marguerite spoke freely about life, loss, and resilience, unguarded by pretension or fear of judgment. "You don't belong here, do you?" she asked suddenly, eyes twinkling. Alexander hesitated. He had expected pity or suspicion, but not this gentle curiosity. "I suppose not," he admitted quietly. Marguerite smiled, not with condescension, but with recognition. "Then enjoy it. Sometimes we need to step outside our world to see it clearly." Her words lingered with him as he moved on, navigating the labyrinth of alleys and streets that he had never known existed. In the marketplace, he observed a young couple haggling over a basket of vegetables. They laughed through the frustration of negotiation, sharing a closeness that wealth had never afforded him. Alexander realized that contentment was not in abundance, but in cooperation, mutual respect, and shared experience. By midday, hunger gnawed at him. He entered a small, run-down diner and ordered the cheapest meal he could find, a plate of rice and beans. The owner, a middle-aged man named Felipe, offered him a free cup of coffee without hesitation. Felipe, who had struggled through years of financial instability, had learned the value of generosity. Sitting on a cracked vinyl chair, Alexander felt the warmth of human kindness surround him in a way money had never provided. As he ate, he noticed a boy outside, no more than 8, carrying a basket of newspapers. He stumbled under the weight but refused to drop any, determined to finish his deliveries. Alexander offered a helping hand, not with the air of superiority, but as an equal. The boy accepted it, and for a moment, Alexander felt the connection he had longed for, a pure, untainted bond between two people, unmediated by wealth or expectation. Throughout the afternoon, Alexander continued to encounter stories that reshaped his understanding of life. A group of street musicians played melodies that echoed through the alleys, their fingers calloused but their spirits light. Children played games with makeshift toys, improvising joy from scraps of wood and discarded cans. A woman carrying a baby shared her bread with a hungry dog, smiling as the animal licked her hands. Each scene was a lesson, a testament to resilience, empathy, and the overlooked richness of simple living. Alexander's mind raced with reflections. How many nights had he spent alone in opulent mansions, surrounded by hollow laughter, while people like these found fulfillment in scarcity? How much of his misery had come from measuring himself by possessions rather than experiences? By late afternoon, Alexander wandered into a small library tucked between crumbling buildings. Books, forgotten by many, were treasures here. He spent hours reading stories of ordinary lives, absorbing wisdom from voices unfiltered by fame or fortune. One particular book, an old diary of a man who had lived through hardship yet found joy in small acts of kindness, struck him deeply. The words seemed to speak directly to him. Happiness is not in what you acquire, but in what you give. As night fell, Alexander found himself in a quiet square where a small community had gathered for an impromptu celebration. Music, laughter, and conversation filled the air. No one knew him as a millionaire, nor did it matter. Here, he was simply Alexander, a human among humans, part of a fleeting but genuine moment of connection. He danced with strangers, shared stories with those willing to listen, and felt a profound sense of belonging he had never known in the boardrooms and ballrooms of his former life. When he finally returned to the bench in the park, exhausted but fulfilled, he understood the true cost of his former life: isolation. Wealth had surrounded him with people, yet none were companions of the soul. Here, in apparent poverty, he had found friendship, laughter, compassion, and an unspoken understanding of life's fragile beauty. The rain began again, washing the streets clean, and Alexander closed his eyes, savoring the feeling of being alive, fully and unabashedly. By the time dawn broke, he knew that he could never fully return to the life he had before, not because he would give away his wealth, but because he had glimpsed the essence of existence beyond possessions. He began to use his fortune with purpose, funding projects that nurtured communities, providing resources for education, art, and opportunities for connection. Yet more importantly, he lived daily with mindfulness, seeking the small joys that no amount of money could buy. A smile exchanged with a stranger, the laughter of children, the quiet dignity of human resilience. Alexander Hartman became a symbol, not of wealth, but of the courage to seek authenticity in a world obsessed with appearances. He reminded those who knew his story that true happiness is earned not through accumulation, but through understanding, empathy, and the willingness to step outside one's comfort zone to see the world as it truly is. In his old age, he would often recount his day as a poor man to those willing to listen, not as a tale of deprivation, but as a testament to the unexpected richness of simplicity. "I discovered," he would say softly, "that poverty can be a teacher and wealth a cage. It is the heart that measures the worth of a life, and the soul that decides what happiness truly means." And so, Alexander Hartman lived the rest of his life in balance, never again enslaved by the illusions of riches. He walked the streets he once wandered in anonymity, joined in laughter and sorrow with those he met, and in doing so discovered the most precious wealth of all, a life filled with real human connection, genuine love, and the quiet, enduring joy of simply being alive.